What happens when you crash a billionaire's black SUV and find yourself at the mercy of his charm? Isabella, struggling to survive, is drawn into Caden Montgomery's high-powered world, where passion and ambition collide. Will she fall for his irresistible offers of luxury, or will the fear of losing herself keep her from taking the leap? In a game of love and power, can Isabella find happiness? Or will the weight of their connection crush her dreams? If you're captivated by Isabella and Caden's intense journey, don't miss out. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay connected for more thrilling twists, emotional drama, and love that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Isabella stumbled into another busy day in the city, feeling the weight of a million things on her shoulders. The rush of the crowded streets blurred past her, a constant reminder of how much she had yet to accomplish and how little she had in the way of support. At 29, she found herself caught in the grips of a life that didn't seem to be going anywhere. Her dreams of becoming a renowned artist felt distant, slipping away further with each unpaid bill and each day spent serving coffee to the impatient customers who never even bothered to look. Up from their phones, her small apartment was a reflection of her state of mind, cluttered with half-started paintings, empty takeout containers, and unpaid rent notices. The reality of it all stung. The life she had built was fragile, and every choice she made felt like it was another thread in the delicate web she was hanging on to. Today was supposed to be different, though. She had finally landed an interview with an art gallery. It was her shot, her one chance to break free from the cycle of struggling for just enough to get by. But first, there was the matter of getting there. The street was chaotic as usual. The honking horns, the thrum of the city's heartbeat, and the impatient shuffle of pedestrians. Isabella's mind raced with thoughts of the interview. She had prepared for weeks. The idea of impressing the gallery owner, of finally showing them her work, had her stomach in knots. She glanced at the time on her phone, cursing under her breath. She was going to be late if she didn't hurry. Her heart beat faster as she gripped the wheel of her beat-up car, trying to maneuver through the traffic, weaving between lanes, just trying to get there on time. But life, as it often does, had other plans. In her rush, she didn't see the dark SUV pull out from a side street, its sleek frame glinting under the morning sun. Her heart skipped a beat as she slammed her foot on the brake, but it was too late. The impact was sudden and loud. A deafening crunch of metal and glass filled the air as her car collided with the luxurious vehicle. Isabella's breath caught in her throat, panic rising in her chest as she quickly shifted the car into park. The world seemed to slow as she stared at the damage. Her heart sank, her mind racing with the consequences. What was she going to do? She had insurance, but that wouldn't cover the damage to the SUV. She'd never be able to afford this. Not in a million years. Her palms were clammy as she got out of the car, her breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. She hoped, no, prayed, that whoever owned the SUV would be understanding. But as she stepped around the wreckage, her stomach turned at the sight of the man who had stepped out of the vehicle, Caden Montgomery. She had seen his name in the headlines before. Just a glance. Maybe in a business magazine or a news story about one of his latest billion-dollar acquisitions. A businessman. A billionaire? A man who had made his fortune by stepping on others, crushing anything in his path to get what he wanted. He was a figure who lived in a world far removed from hers. Someone whose life was filled with luxury and power, who never had to worry about things like rent or making ends meet. And now, here he was, standing in front of her. His expression was calm, too calm for someone whose car had just been wrecked by a stranger. Isabella's heart raced as she stumbled over her words, her nerves bubbling over. I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I wasn't paying attention, and I just, please, let me make it right. I'll pay for everything. I'll fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. Caden didn't speak at first. He just stood there, his cold, sharp gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her knees feel weak. His silence only made her more anxious, her words spilling out in a rush. trying to explain herself. She couldn't help it. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone, desperate to make sense of the situation. "I swear, this wasn't intentional. I'm so sorry. I wasn't—" She stopped herself, her voice breaking as she tried to steady her breathing. "Please, I'll cover the cost. Just let me—" Caden's gaze didn't waver, his eyes icy blue and seemingly unbothered by the chaos around him. He didn't smile, didn't offer any reassurance, just stood there with an almost calculating look. His expensive suit and polished appearance made Isabella feel smaller than she already did. She knew she didn't belong in his world, but this was something else. It wasn't just the car, it was the way he looked at her, like she was an inconvenience, a problem to be fixed. He spoke then, his voice low, controlled. "It's just a car." The words seemed detached, like he was saying it more out of obligation than concern. But there was something else, something under the surface. The way he watched her, the slight raise of his brow as if he were studying her, evaluating her. Isabella didn't know what to make of it. Her mind was still a blur, a whirlwind of panic and embarrassment. She had wrecked a billionaire's car. This wasn't a situation she had prepared for. She was supposed to be at an art gallery interview, not facing off with a man who probably dealt with more important things than her. "I'll pay for everything," she repeated, her voice trembling, but Caden's only response was a quiet, emotionless nod. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary, and in that moment Isabella felt a flicker of something. It wasn't pity. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. An intrigue. As she turned to make the phone call, her hands still shaking, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this moment than just the crash. Something about Caden Montgomery didn't sit right with her. There was more to him than met the eye. And perhaps, just perhaps, the crash wasn't the worst thing that had happened today. Caden Montgomery's world was built on excess. Wealth, power, influence, he had it all, and then some. His name was known in boardrooms, whispered in high-end restaurants, and featured on the covers of magazines that celebrated success, ambition, and ruthless business practices. To him, life was a game, a set of rules to be bent and broken until victory was his. He could buy anything he wanted, build anything he desired, and no one could stand in his way. Everything was predictable, controlled, and above all, carefully curated. He was used to the polished smiles of his colleagues, the fake laughter at charity events, and the constant stream of sycophants eager to attach themselves to his wealth. People were tools to be used, nothing more. Relationships were business transactions. Give a little, take a little, and in the end, everyone got what they wanted. It was a world of perfection, but one that lacked the kind of authenticity Caden had long since given up on expecting. In his experience, no one was real, not really. They wore their masks, carefully constructed and perfect, to hide their true selves. That was until Isabella crashed her car into his. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Not in the way that most people caught his attention. There was no hidden agenda behind her eyes, no ulterior motive behind her words. When she had apologized to him, her voice shaking and sincere, there had been no artifice, no hidden game. She hadn't been trying to impress him. She wasn't flattering him, as so many others did. Instead, Isabella had been raw, unguarded, and that was what unsettled him the most. He was used to women, especially, putting on a show, their polished beauty, their perfect manners, their carefully crafted charm. Isabella, on the other hand, was different. She was rough around the edges, unsure of herself, but somehow more real than anyone he had encountered in years. That was the quality that stuck with him, the authenticity that she unknowingly wore like armor. It wasn't her apology that got under his skin, it was the vulnerability in her voice, the way she seemed truly afraid of the consequences. He had every right to make her pay for the damage to the SUV. The car was expensive, after all, and the repairs would likely cost more than Isabella could afford. But when he'd given her the terms, she would pay the cost of repairs over time, he noticed something that made him pause. She didn't argue. She didn't try to talk her way out of it. Instead, she simply nodded, agreeing to the terms without hesitation. Most people would have begged for mercy, would have tried to find a way out. But not Isabella. She seemed resigned to the weight of responsibility, as if she understood that this was just one more hurdle in a long series of misfortunes that life had thrown her way. That kind of resolve intrigued him. Caden's business dealings were always calculated. He knew how to read people, how to predict their next move. Yet, with Isabella, there was no predictability, no formula to follow. She was a wild card, and that alone made him want to know more. Days passed, and life returned to its usual routine for Caden. The demands of running a multi-million-dollar company were endless, and his attention was often pulled in 1,000 directions at once. But whenever his mind wandered, it always seemed to find its way back to Isabella. He had seen her only once, briefly, but something about that fleeting encounter had stayed with him. He found himself thinking about her more than he cared to admit, wondering what it would be like to have a conversation with her, to know what drove her. Finally, the time came for Isabella to visit his office. She had called the day before to confirm that she was ready to discuss the payment plan for the repairs. Caden had arranged for her to meet him at his office building, and he couldn't help but feel a twinge of anticipation when he saw her walk through the door. She was a striking contrast to everything he was used to. Where his office was sleek, modern, and immaculate, Isabella looked slightly out of place in the polished corporate environment. Her outfit was simple, a plain blouse and a pair of worn jeans, but it was her presence, her very aura, that made her stand out. She seemed both out of place and yet completely comfortable in her own skin, as if she didn't need the trappings of wealth and power to define her. She stepped into his office nervously, her eyes scanning the room as if unsure of where to look. She was clearly out of her element, and it made him wonder why she had agreed to meet him here, in his world, rather than handling everything over the phone. But there was something in her eyes, something that suggested she didn't have a choice. This was how she operated, head down, pushing forward, doing what needed to be done. They exchanged pleasantries, and Caden motioned for her to take a seat across from him. There was an awkward tension between them, the air thick with unspoken words and the weight of the situation. Caden found himself oddly fascinated by her, unable to shake the feeling that there was something more to her than met the eye. "I've got the paperwork for the repairs," he said, pushing a file toward her. "It's going to take a few months to cover the cost, but I trust you'll honor the agreement?" Isabella nodded, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "I will. I'll get it paid off, even if it takes time." Caden studied her for a moment, watching the way she spoke, the way she carried herself. There was no pretense, no act. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just trying to survive. It was refreshing, in a strange way, and it made him want to dig deeper, to know more about the person behind the apology, the person who had crashed into his world so unexpectedly. Their conversation moved to the details of the payment plan, but Caden's mind kept drifting back to her, to the raw honesty in her voice, to the way she had looked at him with no fear, no need to hide. Isabella wasn't the kind of person he could manipulate. She wasn't someone he could control, not in the same way he controlled everything else in his life. And that, in a strange way, was what intrigued him the most. As she stood to leave, Caden found himself hesitating. It was unlike him to feel anything close to curiosity, especially about someone so ordinary. But there was something about Isabella that made him wonder. Before she could make her way to the door, he spoke. "Would you like to grab dinner sometime?" Isabella stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Dinner?" She seemed taken aback by the offer, unsure of his intentions. "Yes," Caden said, his tone casual, though his mind raced with the reasons why he was asking. "I think I'd like to get to know you better, outside of this situation." Her hesitation was palpable, but after a beat, she nodded slowly. "Sure, why not?" As Isabella left his office, Caden couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something he hadn't planned for. Something, or someone, that was starting to pull him in. The world of wealth and power he inhabited was predictable, structured, and secure. But Isabella, she was a mystery, a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve, but couldn't resist trying anyway. The evening was a far cry from the usual business dinners Caden was used to. This wasn't about deals or networking, and it certainly wasn't about power or influence. It was just him and Isabella, sitting across from each other at a small, private restaurant tucked away in the quieter part of the city. The lighting was dim, the soft hum of conversations filling the air, and for once, Caden didn't feel like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Instead, he felt oddly lighter, almost as if he could simply breathe without the constant pressure of his empire bearing down on him. Isabella seemed out of place in this world of wealth and refinement, her simple dress and worn shoes contrasting with the upscale setting. But there was something magnetic about her, something raw and real that Caden couldn't quite put his finger on. She wasn't like the polished, flawless women he usually surrounded himself with. Isabella was real, her presence more genuine than anything he'd felt in a long time. It was this authenticity that made him want to know her better, to hear what lay beneath her surface. As they settled into their seats, Isabella fiddled nervously with her silverware, unsure of how to start. She had agreed to this dinner, but there was a wariness in her eyes. She had agreed, but only because Caden's offer had caught her off guard. A simple dinner, no strings attached. He seemed sincere, but she wasn't sure she could trust him yet. Caden, sensing her unease, decided to take the first step. "I don't think we've really talked about who we are," he said, his tone gentle. "I'd like to know more about you, Isabella. Why don't you start?" She looked at him for a moment, as if considering whether or not to open up. But something in his eyes, something far different from the cold businessman she had first met, encouraged her to let her guard down. She took a deep breath and began. "My family hasn't exactly been what I'd call supportive," she said, her voice low but steady. "I'm the oldest of three, and growing up, it was always up to me to make sure everyone was okay. My mom, she's a single parent, working multiple jobs to keep us afloat. I've watched her sacrifice everything, but I know it's still not enough sometimes. I guess that's why I'm trying so hard to make something of myself, to make sure I don't end up stuck in this cycle." Caden listened intently, his gaze never leaving her face. The vulnerability in her voice struck him in a way he hadn't anticipated. People like him, people in his world, didn't have to struggle. Their lives were mapped out, filled with security and certainty. He had never truly understood the weight of carrying responsibility like Isabella had. He had always been handed everything he needed: money, power, connections. He had never known the burden of working day in and day out to simply survive. "I've been trying to make it as an artist," she continued, her voice tinged with both passion and hesitation. "But it's hard, you know? People don't take you seriously when you're not already somebody. I've been doing odd jobs here and there, waitressing, cleaning, just to pay the bills. But I paint when I can. It's the only thing that makes me feel alive. But sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, if I'll ever get there." There was a moment of silence as Caden processed her words. She wasn't asking for sympathy, wasn't seeking pity. She wasn't a damsel in distress, playing the victim card. She was simply stating the facts of her life. The struggle was real, the exhaustion tangible in her voice, but there was something else too. A fire, a drive that Caden recognized, though it was foreign to him. He was accustomed to seeing people chase after success, but it was always with the aim of gaining something: status, wealth, power. Isabella wasn't chasing after those things. She was chasing after something more intangible, something only she could understand. He couldn't help but be drawn to her. Her strength, her ambition, and yet the vulnerability that lay beneath it all. It was a side of the world he rarely saw, and that made him want to know more. "You're not like most people I meet," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Most people, they have their own agendas. They're after something. But you're not like that. You just want to create. You just want to survive." Isabella gave him a small, wry smile. "Surviving is a good way to put it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just making it through each day, rather than really living." Caden leaned back in his chair, considering her words. He wasn't used to hearing such honesty, especially not in a world full of pretenses. "You deserve more than just surviving," he said, his tone more serious now. "You have talent. I can see that. But what's holding you back?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't want anyone's charity, Caden. I don't want you to feel like you need to save me. I need to find my way on my own." He watched her carefully, feeling an unexpected urge to offer help. He knew he could help her. He could open doors, offer her connections, and give her the resources to take her career to the next level. But he could also see the pride in her eyes, the determination to make it on her own. Isabella wasn't someone who would accept help just because it was offered. She wanted to earn her success. "I wasn't offering charity," Caden said, his voice firm. "I'm offering you an opportunity, a way to take your art further than you ever could on your own. I know people who can help you, who can get your work in front of the right eyes. All you have to do is take the first step." Isabella looked at him, doubt in her eyes. "Why would you do that for me? What do you get out of it?" Caden paused, realizing that for the first time in a long while, he wasn't doing this for a return on investment. He wasn't trying to gain anything from helping her. He wasn't looking for anything except the satisfaction of seeing someone succeed in a way that mattered. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I just want to see you succeed. Maybe it's because I think you're worth it." There was a long pause as they both sat in the weight of the conversation. The evening had shifted in a way neither of them had anticipated. It wasn't just business or obligation anymore. It was real. It was personal. As the night wore on, their conversation deepened. Isabella spoke of the loneliness she had felt for years, the isolation that came with being the responsible one, the one who had to hold everything together. Caden, for his part, revealed something that surprised even him. Despite his wealth and power, he had never felt truly satisfied. He had everything anyone could want, and yet it all felt hollow. He had spent his life building an empire, but in the end, it was only an empire of things. For the first time in years, he found himself admitting to another person that despite everything, something was missing. Isabella listened, her eyes soft with understanding. She didn't have all the answers, but she understood the emptiness he spoke of. She understood what it felt like to be constantly striving for something, even when you weren't sure what that something was. When the night finally came to a close, Caden stood and offered her a hand. "I meant what I said," he said quietly. "I want to help you, but I think you need to take the next step. You have to decide if you're ready to trust me." Isabella paused, her gaze searching his face. There was something between them now, a connection that neither of them had expected. It wasn't just business anymore. It wasn't just about the crash or the offer. It was about something deeper. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice soft but sure. As she left, Caden couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. He wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the brink of something real. The days that followed the dinner seemed to blur together for Isabella. After their candid conversation, a new layer had been added to her relationship with Caden. They had crossed a line from business associates to something more. But what, exactly, it was, neither of them could define. There was a strange tension now that hovered between them, an unspoken awareness of what was simmering beneath the surface. Isabella tried to focus on her work, but every time she picked up a paintbrush or took a breath, her thoughts drifted back to Caden. She couldn't shake the pull of the conversation they'd had, The way he'd listened to her with such rare attention, as if for the first time in a long time, someone was seeing her. She felt it too. The way he made her feel like more than just a waitress, more than someone scraping by. And then, there was the offer. Caden's proposition had lingered in her mind ever since their dinner. The possibility of working together on a limited edition collection for the charity event he was hosting. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. A chance to have her artwork seen, to share it with the world. But there was a catch. She would have to spend time in Caden's world, in his space, his home. She would have to work closely with him, living in his luxurious penthouse while they collaborated. At first, Isabella had been hesitant. She didn't want to be dependent on him, didn't want to owe him anything more than she already did. But the opportunity was too good to pass up. If she didn't take it, she might never get another chance. Caden's offer was the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for, a break she'd worked tirelessly for, and despite her reservations, she knew this was her only shot. The first night she arrived at his penthouse, she was taken aback. The space was grand, yet cold in its perfection. The sleek, modern furniture, the massive windows with a view of the city that seemed to stretch on forever. It was all so overwhelming. It was a world that Isabella wasn't sure she belonged to, but she had no choice now but to step into it. Caden greeted her at the door, his usual air of control evident in his posture. But there was something different in the way he looked at her now. Something that told her he wasn't just seeing her as an artist or a project. His gaze lingered longer than usual, and she felt a flutter of uncertainty in her chest. She wasn't sure what it meant, but the attraction between them was undeniable. "I hope you're comfortable here," he said, as he showed her around. "I know it's a little intimidating at first, but you'll get used to it." Isabella nodded, trying to hide her discomfort. "It's beautiful," she said, though her words felt too small for the enormity of the space. "I'm sure I'll adjust." The next few days were a whirlwind of work, and late nights spent in the penthouse, the city lights flickering outside the windows like a distant dream. Isabella's paintings began to take shape, slowly transforming into the collection she had always envisioned. Caden was an attentive collaborator, offering feedback and support in a way that surprised her. He wasn't like the people she had imagined him to be, distant, cold, controlling. No, he was engaged, present, and surprisingly vulnerable in the moments they shared alone. As the days passed, she started to see another side of Caden, a side that contradicted everything she had known about him. Beneath the polished exterior of the billionaire businessman, there was a man who was deeply lonely, unsure of how to connect with people. His wealth had isolated him, and despite all his power, he struggled with trust. It was clear that Caden had no real friends, no one who cared for him without an agenda. Everyone in his life seemed to want something, except for Isabella. She wasn't asking for anything from him, and that, she realized, made him more comfortable around her. And yet, despite this growing connection, Isabella couldn't shake the fear that Caden might be using her for his own needs. She had seen it before, the way people took advantage of others, the way they preyed on vulnerability. What if he was just using her for the art, for the exposure? What if his interest wasn't genuine? The tension between them continued to build, the attraction undeniable but fraught with uncertainty. There were moments when their proximity felt charged, when a simple brush of their hands or a lingering look could send sparks flying. Isabella felt it. This pull toward him, this chemistry that neither of them seemed able to ignore. But she also felt a knot in her stomach, a fear that if she gave in to that attraction, she would lose herself in the process. There was one moment in particular that stood out, a quiet evening in the penthouse after a long day of work. They were sitting on the couch together, a comfortable silence stretching between them. Isabella's legs were tucked under her, and Caden was leaning back, his eyes focused on her. She wasn't sure how it happened, but somehow They were closer now than they had ever been. There was an intimacy in the air, a tension that neither of them acknowledged, but both could feel. It was Caden who broke the silence first, his voice low and husky. "I'm not good at this," he said quietly, his eyes not leaving hers. "I'm not good at letting people in." Isabella didn't know what to say, but the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. She knew exactly what he meant. He wasn't good at trust. He wasn't good at relationships. He had spent so much of his life building walls around himself. And now, here she was, standing on the other side of those walls, uncertain whether to push forward or turn back. "I know," Isabella said softly. "But I'm not asking you to be perfect, Caden. I'm not asking you to change. I just want to understand you. And I think you want to understand me, too." He met her gaze then, and for a brief moment, something in his eyes softened. "I do," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if I can let you in." The words hung between them, thick with emotion, both of them afraid of what might happen if they allowed this connection to grow beyond just professional. Caden was holding back, and Isabella, for the first time, realized that she was too. The evening ended with an unspoken tension that neither of them could shake. Their proximity had been too much, the chemistry undeniable. Yet, neither of them was ready to cross that line, to give in to the attraction that had been building for weeks. Caden's next words were unexpected. "I can't promise you anything, Isabella, but I can tell you this. I've never wanted something this much. I've never wanted someone to see me the way you do." Isabella's heart raced at his confession, but a part of her held back, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't ready to let her guard down completely. Not yet. "I don't know if I can trust you, Caden," she said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I don't know if you're really here for me, or if this is just about something else." Caden's expression faltered, the vulnerability in his eyes making her feel the weight of his confession even more. He didn't know what to say, and neither did she. But in that moment, they both understood that they were standing on the precipice of something dangerous, a connection that could either build them up or tear them apart. The charity gala was an event that Caden Montgomery had meticulously planned for months. It was an evening filled with the city's elite, business moguls, powerful socialites, and politicians, all gathered in a grand ballroom for a cause that Caden had aligned himself with. It was a night meant to elevate the status of both the charity and the individuals involved. A night of polished smiles and carefully rehearsed conversations. But for Isabella, the gala was something else entirely. It was her moment, her time to step out from the shadows of uncertainty and show the world her art. She had come a long way since that fateful crash, and now, with her collection on display, she was more confident in herself and her work than ever before. She no longer saw herself as just a waitress or an aspiring artist. She was someone now, someone whose art had meaning. Caden stood beside her as they surveyed the crowd. Her pieces were showcased in the center of the room, framed by the gold accents and soft lighting that made each painting seem alive. Isabella had never seen anything like it before. Her work, vibrant with color and passion, had transformed the space into something personal, something that spoke to her struggles, her joys, and the very essence of her soul. "You've done it," Caden said quietly, his eyes scanning the room, then settling on her. "This is what you've always wanted. Your art is finally getting the attention it deserves." Isabella smiled, but the weight of the night seemed to settle over her. She wasn't sure if it was the people, the fancy clothes, or the faces of envy that followed her every move, but something inside her felt unsettled. She could feel eyes on her, eyes of both admiration and jealousy, and though she was proud of her success, she couldn't shake the tension that grew with each passing moment. Among the crowd, Isabella spotted a familiar face, Caden's ex-girlfriend, Lara. She wasn't hard to miss. Lara was everything Isabella wasn't. Polished, poised, and impeccable in every way. The woman had a presence that filled the room, and the way she clung to Caden's arm as if she still belonged there sent a wave of discomfort through Isabella. She tried to ignore it, but the knot in her stomach tightened. Caden's gaze flickered toward Lara as well, and Isabella could feel the sudden shift in the air. There was tension in the way Caden's posture stiffened, in the way Lara's eyes briefly met Isabella's with a knowing, almost condescending smile. "I see you've brought your past with you," Isabella said, trying to keep her tone even, but she couldn't hide the edge of insecurity that crept into her voice. Caden sighed, his jaw tightening. "She's not part of my life anymore, Isabella. But it's complicated." "I'm sure she is," Isabella interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "But it's hard to ignore, Caden. You've spent so much time showing me your world, but I can see that it's not just about art for you, is it? It's about power. It's about status." Caden took a step toward her, lowering his voice. "That's not what this is about, and you know it. You're making something more out of it than there is. But this is real." Isabella's heart pounded in her chest. Her success here tonight, her confidence, it all felt fragile now, threatened by the presence of a woman who seemed to represent everything she wasn't. A life of ease, of power, of luxury. A life that Caden had once shared with someone who wasn't her. Her thoughts were interrupted as Caden's ex-girlfriend made her way over, effortlessly slipping between them with a smile that could freeze anyone in their tracks. "I didn't realize you'd be here, Isabella," Lara said coolly, her eyes gliding over Isabella's attire, which was far less refined than hers. "How delightful to see you. Flourishing. But I suppose it's easy when someone's helping you, isn't it?" Isabella stood her ground, refusing to let Lara's sharp words break her composure. "I'm doing just fine on my own," she said evenly. "It's funny, though. I never realized how easy it was for some people to control everything around them." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the tension between the three of them was palpable. Lara's smile faltered, but she didn't back down. Caden, caught between the two women, found himself more aware of the cracks in his life than he ever had before. Isabella excused herself from the conversation, her heart heavy with a mix of anger and uncertainty. She needed space. She needed to think. She walked through the gallery, her mind swirling with questions about what she truly wanted. She had spent so long chasing this dream, working for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt lost. The people in this world, Caden's world, were nothing like her. Their lives were full of polished appearances and hidden motives. Was that the life she wanted? A life of wealth and status that could never truly fill the emptiness inside? Caden caught up with her in a quieter corner of the event, his voice low. "Isabella, I don't want this to come between us. My past, my world, it's all just noise. You and your art, that is what matters." But Isabella, looking up at him, felt a pang of doubt. "I'm not sure I can live in a world like this, Caden. All this power, all this wealth, it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't want to be part of a world where I'm just another accessory, where I'm defined by what I wear, by who I know, and how much I can give to people like her." Caden's face softened, a rare vulnerability creeping into his expression. "I don't want you to feel like that, Isabella. I want you, the woman who has dreams and who fights every day to make them come true. I've built a life based on money and power, but I don't want to lose you in the process." His words hit her like a wave. Caden was willing to walk away from everything, his wealth, his power, his security, if it meant being with her. Isabella had to make a choice. Was she willing to trust in this love, in this connection they had found? Was she ready to take the leap, to risk everything, knowing it might not turn out the way she hoped? Or was she going to walk away, Return to a life where she could control everything and keep herself safe from the risk of losing herself. The choice was hard, but it wasn't one she could ignore any longer. "I'm not sure," Isabella whispered. "But I need to know if you're serious. I need to know if I'm enough for you, without all the things that come with it. Without the wealth, without the status." Caden nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "You're more than enough for me, Isabella. I don't need anything else. I just need you." With that, Isabella made her decision. She was ready. Ready to trust in love. Ready to let go of her fears. She walked back to him, her heart pounding with the weight of her decision, but with the certainty that, no matter what, she was willing to take the leap into a future with Caden and with herself. We hope you enjoyed the adventure. For more thrilling stories, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Don't miss out on the next twist. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay connected for more excitement ahead.